Here it is. Yo, what's up, alphas? Wah, wah, wah. Today, we're gonna learn how to be the ultimate alpha. Let's go! First tip, lose the whole fake macho persona. It's stupid and nobody likes it. Let me change out of these glasses real quick. Yeah! And with the power of editing, I can see normally now. In 1970, there was a book published called The Wolf, Ecology and Behavior of an Endangered Species. Now, that book really popularized the term alpha wolf, and of course, since then, it's taken on a whole new life. But that book has kind of proven to be not particularly accurate. The original 1970 book is not in print anymore. David Meach, the author of that book, has actually taken that book completely out of print because he says that a lot of the information in that book isn't accurate and does not accurately reflect our modern understanding of wolves. And he then wrote a second book in 2003. His book, which he co-edited with zoologist Luigi Boitani, is far more accurate and up-to-date. So he's advocating that people look towards the 2003 book for the most accurate information, and he says that the 1970 book, a lot of that stuff is not accurate, and honestly kind of never has been, because the study that they were looking at for a lot of the information in that book was a study that was done on wolves in captivity. And most of the wolves in the world are not in captivity. So what they were seeing doesn't actually very accurately describe how wolves work in the natural world, in their own habitats. The whole idea of an alpha wolf does technically exist, but those are not the normal cases. Most normal wolf packs have about 6 to 10 individuals in them, and it's usually a family unit. There's usually a mated pair and their children. Now, typically they'll have wolves that they've had from the past couple of litters, usually going out about 2 years. When a wolf reaches 2 to 3 years old, they will often strike out on their own and start their own little pack. But the pack is just a family unit, and most packs do not have more than one breeding pair. Now, there are some situations in areas where wolf population is very, very dense, in which there will be more than one breeding pair in a pack. So they did have to kind of have a hierarchy within the pack. And so in situations like that, where it's a larger than normal pack, it actually makes more sense for a wolf to stay within the large pack than start their own pack and try to compete for resources. But overall, talking about all wolf packs in the world, it's estimated that no more than 10 to 15% of wolf packs fall under this category of dense wolf packs that actually do have a little bit more of a hierarchy to them. Most wolves kind of just stick with their own families and do their own thing, and that's that. Very, very rarely do you actually see wolves doing this, alpha fight to the death kind of thing. That behavior just doesn't happen in the wild. Sometimes there will be small arguments, but most of these occur during meal times. So usually the adults will eat, they'll feed the younger ones, and then they'll let the older kids eat. And so sometimes that can cause a little bit of tension, between some of the siblings or between the adult wolves and some of the older kids. But usually those fights are just kind of, one little yap and nip at each other, and that's about it. There aren't these big fights to the death to be the alpha that this masculinity culture has portrayed and kind of, spread around that idea. That's not really how wolves work. So the reason that alphas kind of showed up in this earlier study is, again, because they were specifically looking at wolves in captivity. Now, normally when there are animals in captivity, it will be a group of unrelated animals. Typically, they'll only stick to one sex, so that way you don't have them reproducing. So in this particular case, they were looking at, I forget the exact number, I want to say it was like 6 or 7 wolves in captivity that were all males. So normally those wolves would not live together. A pack is usually around 6 to 10 individuals, a breeding pair, and their offspring. So everyone in that pack is related and is family. Now, of course, like in any family, there are going to be small squabbles from time to time, but for the most part, wolf packs are generally pretty chill. Anyway, the reason that these wolves then in captivity developed this hierarchy is because it was a very unnatural way for these wolves to exist. Again, they would not exist like this in the wild. You would not see, 6 or 7 wolves forming their own pack of only males. That's just not something that would happen. In zebras, this kind of thing can happen where you have a bachelor herd of all younger males. And typically why that happens in zebras is a typical herd will be one breeding male and around 5 or so breeding females and their offspring. And so there is a lot more of a need for breeding females than there is for breeding males. And so a lot of these, young male zebras, once they kind of age out of the herd, don't really have anywhere else to go. So they just kind of form these bachelor herds. So this kind of thing does happen in nature, but it does not happen with wolves. With wolves, they typically stay with their family unit until they're about 2 or 3 years old, at which point they will strike out on their own. There are lone wolves out there, but typically when a wolf is alone, it's because they are actively looking for a mate, so that way they can start their own little pack. Anyway, in captivity, these wolves were kind of fighting because there were only males there, and so it was a very unnatural kind of situation for these wolves to be in. So of course they formed this very unnatural hierarchy that led to this study that ended up giving all kinds of wrong information. So like I said, you can find alpha wolves in the wild in these larger packs. However, those large packs are uncommon. And in a normal situation, a wolf will basically just live with its family unit until it's old enough to go start its own family. That's kind of the way that humans work a lot of the times too. You live with your parents until, you're old enough and mature enough to go out in the world and get a job, get your own place to live. Eventually you meet someone, get married, and have kids. A lot of humans live like that, and almost every wolf lives like that. Using this terminology like alpha wolf that we now know is very outdated and not accurate and not how wolves actually live in nature. It's kind of akin to calling your father or whoever is the head of your household the alpha human. And that brings me back to the very first thing I said in this video. One easy tip on how to be the ultimate alpha is to be a good father and husband, because that's what these wolves are doing. That's how they're being a good alpha. That's how they're supporting their pack. Is they're helping to feed and they're helping to protect their pack, because that's what real alpha wolves do. That's how they live in the wild. That is their normal state. So, if you really want to idolize wolves, don't buy into this whole, you know, masculinity thing of I've got to be the biggest, scariest, loudest, whateverist guy. That's not how wolves work. Wolves are very family oriented, and from what we've seen in the wild, they take good care of their family, and they love each other and they support each other. So that's how you be the ultimate alpha. And here's the thing, I think a lot of people hear the term toxic masculinity and they're like, oh, masculinity isn't toxic. And it's like, no, we're talking about a specific kind of masculinity here, because you can be masculine in different ways. When we're talking about toxic masculinity, we're talking about the people who feel like they have to be the alpha, the people who are out there looks maxing and getting into fights with other people to try and assert their dominance over them. That kind of masculinity is toxic, and that's not real masculinity. That is mostly just for show and doesn't really mean anything, doesn't really do anything. There is a good kind of masculinity, though, and that is the masculinity that cares for and protects and makes sure that your family is fed and taken care of, and providing for those in your life that you love. So if you want to be an alpha, that's how you be an alpha. You show love, you show protection, and you show support for those around you in your life, for your family, and for your friends, because that's what wolves do. That's what real alphas do. If you like stuff like this, make sure you like and subscribe. I make new videos every Monday and Thursday, so hit subscribe, hit that bell icon, and you'll be the first to know whenever something comes out. Also, even just liking this video is a huge, huge help. Okay, bye.